Hey guys, tonight we journey to the edge of history, where dusty sandals tread over sun-baked clay and the Tigris hums in the distance. You're waking up beneath rustling date palms, tangled in a stiff linen sheet that smells faintly of river mud and old olives. Above you, the sky is already that glowing, syrupy blue of a Mesopotamian morning. And yeah, it's already hot. Like sweat beating before you sit up hot. You're not exactly royalty. Actually, you're a humble garden hand for a wealthy household in the ancient Sumerian city of Ur. It's roughly 4,000 years ago, give or take a few papyrus receipts. And let's be honest, if you don't get up now, someone's going to notice. And in a world where gods supposedly track your laziness, you probably won't survive that particular performance review. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're cozy already, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see who else is falling asleep in the shadow of a ziggurat. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You roll off your woven mat, grimacing as your bare feet touch the floor. It's not exactly cool stone. It's more like sun-warmed clay, with bits of crushed pottery embedded in it. The breeze coming through the reed window barely stirs, but you can hear the bustling city beyond. Goats braying, carts creaking, distant shouting in Akkadian and Sumerian both. You rub your eyes with the back of your hand and grab your belt. The embroidered pouch tied to it still smells like garlic from yesterday's leek harvest. Your room is small, the walls covered in faded murals. Two fish facing each other, a pair of lions mid-prowl. Your cousin says they're protective symbols, but honestly, one of them looks like it was drawn by someone who'd never seen a lion in their life. You step into the alley and immediately squint. The light bounces off clay bricks and dazzles your not quite awake brain. Children run by barefoot, shouting something about stolen figs and a cat with one eye. You let them pass. Not your problem. Not yet. You trudge down the canal path toward the orchard. The air smells sweet. Dates ripening in the sun. The slight rot of yesterday's fallen fruit baking into compost. Cicadas buzz in the grass. A farmer nearby is already ankle-deep in irrigation runoff, muttering to himself as he rearranges small clay barriers to channel the water more evenly. You nod at him. He doesn't look up. The canal is everything here. Without it, the city dies. It carries water from the Euphrates, snaking through Ur like a vein. Your job today? Make sure the pomegranates don't get flooded again. That one time last week cost you your afternoon bread and a long lecture about the delicate balance between divine blessing and agricultural stupidity. You pass the main gate of the garden complex, marked by two columns painted with stylized birds and cracked mosaics. A skinny dog blinks at you from under a cart. You hear someone inside already shouting about tool baskets and misplaced shears. It's Belly Marduk, your supervisor, who despite his very fancy name, mostly just throws apricots at people when he's annoyed. You duck under the vines and head toward the northern beds. There's weeding to do. Of course there is. The soil here is dark and rich, something you're weirdly proud of, even though no one ever says thank you for good dirt. You squat low, pulling at creeping vines that don't belong. Nearby, bees flit between saffron blossoms. You pinch one of the weeds too hard and end up with green juice on your tunic. Classic. A woman with an armful of ceramic pots walks by. balancing them like some kind of Mesopotamian circus act. You know her, Kala. She's in charge of the herb beds and always smells like crushed mint and something slightly medicinal. She doesn't wave, but she does lift her eyebrow at your weed-stained knees. You pretend not to notice. There's a hum in the air, half cicadas, half temple chants carried on the breeze from the ziggurat district. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to be a priest, robed, perfumed, exempt from manure duty. Then you remember that whole fasting thing they do before rituals and decide you'd miss breakfast too much. Speaking of which, your stomach growls. Hard. It's almost time for the communal garden meal. Flat barley bread, dried figs, and maybe, if the gods are smiling, a strip of goat jerky. You reach up and pluck a tiny fig that no one will miss. It's warm and slightly underripe. Still, you chew it thoughtfully as you listen to the city beginning to roar. You hear the temple horns sound, one short, one long. That means someone's late to the palace garden rounds. Not you, thankfully. Not yet. As you stand and stretch, a mosquito buzzes dangerously close to your ear. You swat it away, wondering, not for the first time, how ancient people ever managed to build a civilization with all these bugs. Historians still argue whether the ziggurat was a temple or an astronomical observatory. You personally think it might have been a really tall way to get away from insects. Suddenly the dog from earlier darts past you with something in its mouth. A clay ladle? You're about to chase it when Belly Marduk yells your name. Loudly. Ugh. So much for a calm morning. You head toward him, ducking under grapevines, and nearly tripping over a basket of pruning knives. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows. Weirdly late for that, but okay. Maybe it's got temple ambitions. Just as Belly Marduk starts lecturing you about the misaligned irrigation gates, which you're 90% sure wasn't your fault, you spot a bee land gently on your shoulder. It stays there, totally still, like even it is tired of this heat. You think about brushing it off, but decide, maybe it's your lucky bee. The bee eventually buzzes away, which is good because Belly Marduk's lecture is escalating into hand gestures, and you really can't concentrate with a potentially divine insect ambassador on your shoulder. You nod like you're absorbing his wisdom, but in truth, your mind's already drifting toward the melon patch. It's always cooler there, shaded by a row of fig trees and draped in climbing vines like nature's own laundry line. You break away as soon as he sends you off with a grumble. Your sandals slap against the damp stone channel edging the orchard. Somewhere in the reeds, frogs are beginning their mid-morning debates. Deep, throaty croaks that echo strangely through the alleys of the garden. You half expect one of them to jump out, wearing a headdress and demanding tax grain. As you round the herb beds, you spot the other garden hands already clustered around a low stone platform where breakfast is being laid out. A flat disk of barley bread per person, 2 dates each, and a chunk of soft cheese wrapped in fig leaf. You settle onto the stone and tear off a corner of bread, dunking it in a shallow dish of oil, infused with crushed sesame and garlic. It tastes like chewy bread dipped in mud, but with hints of nostalgia. One of the newer workers, a boy barely old enough to braid his own sandals, leans in and whispers, "Did you hear? The palace cook's melon got stolen. Again." You snort. "What, the sacred cantaloupe?" He nods solemnly, chewing his bread like it's a crime to enjoy it too much. They think it's the groundskeeper from the northern pool. He's always smelling like melon lately. You raise an eyebrow. Melon-scented guilt. That's new. It's always something around here. Last week, a scribe accidentally used a prayer tablet as a cutting board. This week, we're on melon theft. The gods must be exhausted trying to keep up. You polish off the last date and brush crumbs from your tunic. The sun's higher now, casting sharp lines across the dirt paths and making the grape leaves shimmer with heat. You squint toward the palace kitchen wing. It's just visible beyond a tall reed fence, where smoke curls from a clay chimney and someone is shouting in a tone that suggests a cucumber was just found where a melon should have been. You're sent that way next, carrying a basket of garden herbs, a mix of cilantro, rue, and something else that smells like onions but isn't. You pass through the back gate, guarded by two stone lions whose faces are so worn by wind and time, they look more like tired cats. Inside, the kitchen smells like heaven, if heaven had a clay oven and too many cooks. A scrawny man in a fire-blackened tunic barks, "That better be fresh," before grabbing the basket from your arms and plunging a handful into a boiling pot without so much as a sniff. You watch a moment as steam rises, catching glimpses of palace life through the chaos. Scribes sitting on low stools, copying something onto fresh clay. Servants carrying trays stacked with freshly baked flatbread. And an older woman carefully slicing what might be a cucumber. Or possibly the cucumber. Suddenly, someone screams. A heavy clay bowl shatters. You flinch. "What now?" a cook mutters, looking over his shoulder. A younger assistant points dramatically. "The sacred melon is gone," gasps all around. You glance down at your feet, just to make sure you didn't accidentally step on it. "The priest said it was for the evening feast. The high priestess is supposed to cut it in half with the moon blade." You're not even sure what a moon blade is, but it sounds like something you should not mess with before lunch. A heavy silence falls, broken only by the splutter of boiling lentils. Then, as if summoned by divine farce, a small striped cat scurries through the room with, yes, a chunk of melon clutched in its mouth. Chaos. Several cooks give chase, yelling and tripping over baskets and each other, while you stand in the middle of it all holding a leftover sprig of rue and wondering how this became your life. You consider making a clever exit, but just then, one of the scribes calls your name. "Hey, you speak enough Akkadian to read a delivery list, right?" You turn slowly. I mean, define enough. He thrusts a small clay tablet into your hands, its surface still warm from the scribe's palm. On it are neatly pressed wedge-shaped symbols, the kind that require either a sharp mind or a generous helping of guessing. Your job. Find the delivery noted here. Apparently someone left a sack of leeks for the temple priest, and it's your problem now. You wander out the back gate, tablet in hand, scanning the chaos of kitchen and garden life. People move with purpose, or at least the appearance of it, balancing bowls, calling orders, chasing cats. The sun is directly overhead now, casting everything into a bright haze. You finally find the sack in question near the outer well. You check the tablet. You check the sack. You frown. The symbols don't quite match. You deliver it anyway. Later, you'll find out you gave the temple priest a sack of spoiled onions instead of his ceremonial leeks. He'll take it as an omen of famine, declare a minor fast, and someone will have to repaint half the temple mural in repentance. But that's future you's problem. Present you is mostly just trying not to drop the empty tablet into the well. As you head back toward the garden, A sharp breeze blows across the canal, stirring up the smell of wet earth and crushed leaves. You pause, close your eyes, and let the scent fill your lungs. It's easy to forget, with all the yelling and melodrama, that you live in one of the most advanced cities in the world. Ur has granaries, libraries, trade routes stretching to lands with names you can't pronounce. And yet, no one has figured out how to keep cats from stealing fruit. Historians still debate whether the massive palace kitchens were used solely for ritual feasts, or whether they also fed staff and laborers. Given the sheer number of broken pots and frantic cooks you just witnessed, you're pretty sure it's both. You reach the garden again, stepping over a line of ants ferrying crumbs from breakfast back to wherever ants live. The sun's angling westward now, and the shadows of the fig trees stretch long and lazy over the tilled rows. You sigh, adjust your tunic, and prepare for the afternoon tasks. There's weeding to do, mulch to spread, and probably a long explanation about why you left a sacred melon crime scene without taking notes. But for a moment, everything is still, even the frogs. Your fingers sink into the soil, warm and fine as ground cinnamon. Afternoon has settled over the garden like a thick wool blanket, muffling the distant sounds of carts and merchants, even softening the eternal squeals of the temple goats. You work with your back to the sun, loosening the beds around a row of squat, leafy greens that the head scribe insists are divine in soup, but smell suspiciously like bad breath and pond water. Careful with those, Kala calls from a few rows away. The roots bruise if you yank them too hard. You glance up and catch her squinting through the vine shade, arms folded and a smirk tugging at the edge of her mouth. She's elbow deep in the dill patch, her braids tucked under a linen scarf that's already blotched with green. You raise your eyebrows and pretend to bow slightly, hands still in the dirt. As you command, mistress of the soup weeds. She chuckles, then tosses something in your direction. It's a small sprig of hyssop. You sniff it, peppery and sharp. Supposedly, it wards off spirits, though you're pretty sure nothing in this garden is scared of anything, except maybe Belly Marduk's apricot-throwing tantrums. You return to your weeding, trying not to think too hard about the melon debacle. These beds need attention. Yesterday's flood left the lower rows soggy, and the tiny cucumbers are beginning to droop like hungover nobles. You build a low ridge of earth around them, sculpting tiny levees with your fingers. It's satisfying work, even if no one will ever see it, unless, of course, a god shows up in disguise as a cucumber inspector. Stranger things have happened. Speaking of strange, a commotion begins near the outer garden wall. You glance up and see a cluster of laborers gathered around something, or someone. You wipe your hands on your sash and wander over. It's a traveler. Dusty robes, frayed sandals, and a leather pouch slung over one shoulder like he's got all of Ur's secrets tucked inside. He's smiling wide and sweating heavily, clearly fresh from the northern trade road. "I bring honeyed dates from Mari," he declares, a little too cheerfully for someone who's been walking through dust storms. You watch as one of the scribes, Samnu, the one with an allergy to logic, steps forward and starts grilling him about delivery scrolls and city stamps. The traveler shrugs and points to a cuneiform mark on his pouch. "That's my proof." You peer at it from behind Samnu's shoulder. It's definitely writing, but whether it says official date merchant or property of goat number 12 is up for debate. Historians still argue whether merchants in this era carried standardized identification tablets or simply relied on well-known family seals. Judging by the way Somnu is squinting and sweating, it seems no one really knows. The head gardener finally arrives, an older man with the posture of a leaning ladder and a voice like sand rubbing stone. He waves the traveler in and gestures for the dates to be inspected. You don't know who tastes them first, but within seconds, the crowd has loosened, laughter bubbling up like cool water. You're handed one. You bite. It's perfect. Sweet, sticky, a little sun-warmed, and filled with just enough grit to remind you this is Ur, not heaven. While the others swarm the merchant with trade questions, you slip away, date still in your mouth. You find the shade of a young olive tree and plop down against its trunk, letting the breeze cool your sweat-slicked neck. The tree is still small, probably no more than a few seasons old, but already determined, with leaves like tiny blades and a stubborn lean toward the sun. You stare up at the sky. It's hazy now, a burnt orange color curling around the horizon. Somewhere out in the direction of Eridu, thunder rumbles. Or maybe that's just the market wagons unloading spice crates again. Hard to tell in this city. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to pause. The rhythm of the garden hums around you, buzzing insects, the slap of sandals on clay, the occasional clink of a ceramic pot being set down a little too hard. Someone nearby is humming a lullaby, probably to the fig trees, or maybe to herself. It's hard to tell where one prayer ends and another begins around here. You remember your mother singing that same tune once while grinding grain, her arms dusted in flour and her hair pinned back with a thorn comb. You haven't seen her in years, not since the drought sent half your village scrambling for city work. You hope she found a place near the temple like she wanted. You hope she still sings. Your break doesn't last. Belly Marduk's voice echoes over the hedges. Where's the idiot who took the leeks to the wrong priest? You slowly, silently tuck the date pit into your pocket, back on your feet. You stretch, spine cracking in protest. Afternoon chores loom. Composting, reinforcing the shade walls, shooing goats that like to sneak through the southern hedges and munch the sacred squash. You consider faking a limp to get out of it, but with your luck, the priest's moonblade might be real and moon-shaped and currently very sharpened. So, you get to it. Compost first. You carry 2 baskets of garden scraps, leaves, stems, ungrateful carrots, and dump them onto the pile behind the tool shed. The pile steams faintly, alive with decay and rebirth, like everything else in this place. A boy near the ziggurat once told you that compost piles are where demons sleep during the heat of the day. You asked why they'd choose that instead of, say, the palace pool. He'd shrugged and said, demons like warmth, and they're lazy. You never looked at compost the same way again. You finish up just as the sun dips lower, casting everything in a deep golden hue. Long shadows stretch from the garden walls like fingers reaching for evening. In the distance, bells chime, the slow, deliberate kind that signal the start of temple rituals. Someone's chanting. You don't understand the words, but the tone is familiar. Praise, petition, bargaining with invisible forces. You turn toward the garden gate and see Belly Marduk watching you from the edge of the shade. He raises a hand, not to scold this time, but just to wave. You wave back, surprised. Maybe he liked the composting. Maybe he thinks you're someone else. Either way, you head inside. Inside the garden's central courtyard, the shade has deepened into something cooler, softer, like a woven canopy stitched from reeds and whispers. You duck beneath an arbor of flowering beans, their purple blossoms swaying just enough to brush your cheeks like shy applause. The day's heat is still clinging to the stone paths, but the garden is shifting now, cooling down, slowing down. Dinner prep begins hours before anyone eats, not because the food takes that long, but because the rituals do. You're sent to gather lotus stems from the upper pond. It's quiet there, just frogs, dragonflies, and that one bird that always sounds like it's complaining about taxes. The pond smells like mint and old fish. You wade in, sandals squishing through silt. The water ripples with each movement, reflecting thin clouds stretching across the sky like someone smudged them with a thumb. Lotus plants are sacred, you've been told, symbols of life and rebirth, or maybe just really stubborn weeds with good PR. Still, the cook wants 3 bundles, and you're not about to argue with someone who knows how to boil your name into stew. As you pluck the stalks, thick and hollow, their leaves bobbing around your knees, you spot something glinting in the shallows. You reach down and pull up a small bronze pendant on a frayed leather string. It's shaped like a fish, barely longer than your thumb, and etched with tiny cuneiform signs, probably a charm. You slip it into your pouch. You've learned not to announce these little finds. Last time you found an old seal ring near the irrigation ditch, 5 scribes argued for an hour about whether it belonged to a legendary merchant or a particularly literate goat. As you wade back out, water dripping from your hem, you notice the temple lights flicker on in the distance, tiny flames behind latticed windows. A wind picks up, cooler now, brushing against the papyrus reeds and lifting the edge of your sash. It carries smells from the kitchens: garlic, baked dates, and roasted fowl, rich and smoky. You realize your stomach is doing that embarrassing thing where it growls loud enough to startle birds. You deliver the lotus to the kitchen court, where the cooks receive it with the same enthusiasm as a tax collector receiving last week's barley. Finally, one mutters, already peeling leaves with a curved bronze blade. You're handed a pile of dried tamarisk bark in return. To the smoke pit. And don't inhale too deep this time. You nod solemnly. Last time you inhaled, you spent half an hour convinced you could talk to trees. One tree in particular, a very judgmental pomegranate, still haunts your dreams. The smoke pit is behind the fig grove near the compost demons. It's little more than a shallow trench lined with broken bricks and blackened stones. Someone left a pile of reeds here earlier. You arrange the bark, sprinkle some dried herbs from your pouch, and strike the fire flint. Smoke curls up lazily at first, then grows bold, dancing into the sky with that wild, untamed energy that always feels slightly alive. You fan it gently, watching as it thickens and starts to wind through the garden paths. This isn't for cooking. It's for the insects, the spirits, and, some say, the attention of certain gods who enjoy the scent of burnt tamarisk more than they enjoy temple hymns. That last part may have been started by a lazy priest with allergies, but still. You stay with the fire for a while, poking it with a reed stick and watching the sparks leap like tiny suns. The smoke carries stories, they say, travels through the wind and finds your ancestors, or your enemies, or anyone who might need a reminder that you're still here, still part of this vast tangled tapestry of life, labor, and vegetables. You think about that fish pendant again. Someone once wore that, maybe for protection, maybe just for luck. Maybe it fell off while they were fleeing something, or someone. Your mind wanders in spirals, looping around fragments of stories told in whispers, curses, lost loves, forgotten feasts. Then your stomach interrupts again with a loud groan that even the smoke pit seems to acknowledge. You head back toward the kitchen, brushing soot from your tunic and trying to look like someone who definitely didn't almost fall asleep by a mystical smoke trench. Inside, the feast preparations are in full swing. Large bowls of cracked emmer wheat are being stirred with wooden paddles. Pomegranates are being opened like treasure chests, their ruby seeds scooped into clay dishes. A slow roasted goose is being carved with the kind of reverence normally reserved for royal scrolls. And there, in the center of it all, is the recovered sacred melon, or at least, a different melon dressed as the sacred melon. The head cook, an unflappable woman named Zazu, is painting thin streaks of blue glaze on its rind, chanting under her breath about moonblades and sacrificial fruit. You decide not to ask. Instead, you're handed a bowl of crushed lentils and told to stir until your arm goes numb. The paste is thick and sticky, with a texture somewhere between clay and regret. You mix dutifully while the room fills with heat, voices, and the rhythmic scrape of wooden tools. Someone starts humming. Someone else claps along. Before long, there's an impromptu kitchen chorus, half melody, half mockery. You can't help but grin. One of the junior scribes leans in and asks, "Did you know the king's astrologer eats here sometimes? Says the garden's proximity to the ziggurat aligns the food with the stars." You blink. "What does that mean?" He shrugs. "I think it means he likes the bread." You stir a little faster. As the sun begins to slide behind the horizon, the pace quickens. Dishes are arranged on woven mats. Clay jugs filled with sweet beer and date wine are stacked in tall pyramids. The scent in the air is now overwhelming. Smoke, herbs, spice, and something sharp and earthy that might be pickled radish or very confused garlic. The feast is almost ready. You're sent to the inner courtyard to help with the seating arrangements. You roll out reed mats, place cushions, and line up palm leaf fans. It's not for the nobles. This is a garden feast for the priests, the scribes, and the few lucky workers who drew the right tokens this week. You're one of them. You sit last, careful not to touch anything too early. Candles are lit, flickering in little clay holders. The shadows they cast dance on the brick walls, like ghost stories coming alive. Someone begins to speak. A short prayer to Ninurta, god of farming and war. You mutter the lines under your breath. You've heard them since you were barely tall enough to reach the low fig branches. And then, like magic, food. Placed before you in small, careful portions. A scoop of lentils, a wedge of flatbread, a strip of goose, a pinch of pickled mustard greens, and yes, a sliver of that ridiculous celestial melon. You raise it to your lips, pausing just for a moment as the wind carries in the garden's nighttime breath. Cool, fragrant, laced with a promise. Then you take a bite. The melon tastes better than you expected. Crisp, faintly sweet, with a whisper of something floral that you're pretty sure wasn't there when it was first offered to the moon priest. Maybe it's the glaze. Or maybe it's just that everything tastes better when you're not being threatened with ceremonial blades. You chew slowly, letting the flavors unfurl across your tongue while the garden hums around you. The evening meal is a low murmur of contented voices and clinking pottery. No shouting, no complaints. Just the kind of silence that only arrives after a day spent under the sun, knee-deep in sacred dirt and questionable goose grease. Your cushion is softer than usual, probably a leftover from the priest's quarters. You shift slightly and watch a beetle crawl across the reed mat. its iridescent shell glinting in the lamplight like a shard of turquoise. You resist the urge to flick it away. Even the beetles seem holy here, or at least very well fed. Across the circle, Kala is tearing a piece of flatbread with exaggerated reverence. She catches your eye and grins. The lentils aren't cursed tonight. That's progress. You raise your goose leg and salute. Or the cook ran out of scorpion powder. A few people laugh. The sound lifts gently into the warm night air. Nearby, a scribe with an oil-smudged tunic is muttering to himself between bites. He's sketching something onto a wax tablet with his stylus. Lines, stars, some dots. Charting omens again, someone murmurs. This is normal. You're used to it by now. In Ur, everything is a message from the gods if you squint hard enough. The pattern of birds flying west, the way the beans grow in rows, even the number of times a cat sneezes near the barley stores. Twice means rain. 3 times means a minor war. 4 times, and the cat just has allergies. Historians still argue, Kala says, almost like she's reading your mind, whether those omen tablets were scientific astronomy or just highly specific wish lists. You nod, wiping melon juice from your chin with the edge of your sleeve. Maybe both. Maybe someone just really hated bad weather. She tears off another chunk of bread and dips it into her lentils with practiced ease. Or they just wanted an excuse to stay inside when the river flooded. The mention of the river reminds you of something. Oh, found this near the lotus pond, you say, fishing the fish pendant from your pouch and sliding it across the mat. Kala picks it up and examines it, tilting it toward the candlelight. Her brow furrows. Looks Akkadian. Maybe a travel charm, or something they buried in the foundation of a house. You raise an eyebrow. In the pond? She shrugs. Maybe the house moved, or the pond did. You both sit quietly with that for a moment. A breeze moves through the garden, rustling the date palms and making the lamplight flicker. Shadows dance on the brick walls again, long-limbed, twisting, not quite human. Someone strikes a note on a lyre. It vibrates through the courtyard like a ripple through still water. Then another. A soft rhythm begins, slow and sleepy, just a backdrop to the meal. The music is soothing, the kind of tune that makes your shoulders lower without you realizing. You let yourself lean back, hands resting in your lap, and exhale through your nose like a tired ox. Zazu, the cook, walks past with a clay jar tucked under one arm. She pauses near you and pours a small cup of thick, cloudy beer. It's slightly sour, slightly sweet, and entirely warm. Not in temperature, just in vibe. You sip it slowly. She nods once, then moves on. Remember the old barley priest who used to lecture the beer? Kala says suddenly. You almost choke. The one who said it needed moral encouragement? She nods. He said bad barley produced angry beer unless someone whispered to it. You grin. Maybe that's why this batch is so nice. Someone finally read it a bedtime story. You both chuckle and return to your food. The stars are out now, visible between the gaps in the trellis. You spot the familiar shapes. The curved line of the bull of heaven, the 7 scribes, the river jar. Someone once told you that if you look long enough, you'll see your own name written in the stars, if the gods find you interesting enough. You stare a little longer, just in case. Beside the seating mats, the fire from the smoke pit has been repurposed into a bonfire. It crackles softly, casting golden light across the carved brick floor. A few children, temple acolytes, judging by the shaved stripes in their hair, are crouched near it, roasting skewers of onions and dates. One of them looks up at you. Do you want some? He asks, holding out a stick. You nod and reach for it, letting the warmth of the fire wash over your face. The skewer is sticky and smoky, the onions softened into sweet little pearls, the dates almost caramelized. You thank him with a nod. The child grins, then returns to the fire. You watch them for a moment, so serious, so focused, as if these small acts of cooking were part of some larger ritual. Maybe they are. Do you ever wonder, Kala says beside you, what happens to all of this? The food, the chants, the jokes, when we're gone. You glance at her. She's not smiling now, just staring into the firelight. You think about your mother again, about the song, about the fish pendant and the buried house. Maybe it just becomes part of the garden, you say. Or the stars. She nods slowly. Yeah, maybe. Another breeze passes through, cooler now, with the scent of clay and charcoal and river wind. The music drifts toward a softer tune. The chatter has thinned, most people too full or too tired to continue. Someone yawns audibly and earns a half-hearted shh. You lie back on your mat, one arm under your head, staring up at the patch of sky visible above. The stars blink slowly, patiently. The garden exhales around you. Somewhere in the background, a goat snorts. The mood is broken, briefly. You smile. Your back sinks deeper into the woven mat as you stare at the stars overhead. So faint, yet so confident, twinkling like they know secrets you'll never live long enough to hear. The garden has shifted into its night rhythm now. Crickets chirp softly beneath the fig trees, and a chorus of frogs sets up near the upper pond. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays like it just realized it forgot to pay rent. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to it all. The hum of insects, the flicker of torches in their holders, the muted sound of someone snoring too close to the date wine jug. You're full, warm, a little sticky from the smoke and honey glaze. It's perfect. And then, just when you think sleep might win, the summons comes. You groan quietly as you're nudged by a sandal. Up, whispers Kala, crouched beside you. It's time. You blink. Time for what? I just got horizontal. She grins. Sacrifice duty. Seriously? I thought I was off rotation. Yeah, so did I. But the priest said the smoke was especially auspicious tonight, and you were specifically requested. You sit up, rubbing your eyes. By name? Well, more like by smell. You reek of tamarisk bark and roasted goose. Very holy. You sigh, but stand anyway, joints creaking slightly as you brush off your tunic. The stars wheel lazily overhead as you make your way to the back of the garden, where the sacred enclosure lies. This part of the garden is different, quieter, heavier. The plants here are more symbolic than edible. Rows of sacred barley, fig trees grown from cuttings said to have been taken from Nibru, even a vine that supposedly once touched Enheduanna's ceremonial veil. Though historians still argue whether Enheduanna actually wore veils or if that detail was added by overly dramatic poets. In the center of it all, the small altar, low and rectangular, carved from limestone and inlaid with copper. It's covered in ash and flower petals, and surrounded by clay urns filled with last season's offerings, grains, oils, and the occasional slightly mummified fish. A priest is waiting, of course. He's young, nervous-looking, and fidgeting with his ceremonial sash like he's not sure which shoulder it's supposed to go over. Ah, yes, you, he says when he sees you. Excellent. We've, selected the offerings, all 3 of them. Kala joins you, raising an eyebrow. 3? The priest clears his throat, and gestures to a low table nearby. On it sits a bowl of lentils, naturally, a lump of frankincense wrapped in linen, and a gourd. Not just any gourd. The gourd, the wobbly, misshapen one, someone painted with eyes and a tiny beard earlier in the day. It's wearing a sash made from palm fiber and looking somehow deeply smug. I thought that was a joke, you mutter. The priest straightens. No joke. The signs were clear. A gourd must be offered tonight to ensure continued harmony in the garden. The gourd was chosen. Kala leans in. Do you think they asked the gourds and this one volunteered? You smirk. Or maybe it lost a bet. You help arrange the items on the altar. The lentils go first, poured carefully into a shallow dish. Then the frankincense, its scent rising like memories trapped in ancient spices. Finally, the gourd. You place it gently in the center, bowing your head a little more than necessary, just in case the gods are watching or laughing. The priest lights a small flame and begins the invocation, voice trembling slightly at first, but gaining strength with each line. The words are familiar. Praises to Ninurta, Ninkasi, and the garden spirits, chanted in a slow rhythm that aligns with the crackle of the nearby torch. You and Kala echo the last lines, your voices blending with the night wind. There's a moment of silence. Then, from somewhere deep within the garden, a bird cries out, sharp and sudden. The priest looks up, startled. That's the signal. You frown. Signal for what? He gestures behind you. You turn, and there, emerging from the shadows, is the temple dog. Now, this dog is not just any dog. It's old, mostly blind, and missing at least 2 teeth. It's also revered as an avatar of Gula, the healing goddess, because it once barked during a ritual and someone's rash cleared up the next day. The dog pads forward slowly, pauses near the altar, sniffs the gourd, and, after a long, dramatic pause, licks it once, then trots away. The priest exhales. It is done. You and Kala glance at each other, stifling laughter. Later, as you walk back toward the sleeping mats, Kala says, "Do you think the gods really care about gourds and dogs?" You shrug. Maybe. Or maybe they just like a good show. You pass through the fig trees again, their leaves rustling like hands whispering secrets. The embers from the cooking fires are still glowing faintly, casting a warm orange hue over the clay walls. A few people are still awake, murmuring quietly, or laying out extra mats for the late night stars. You lie back down, exhausted but light, the air around you full of roasted fig smoke and the lingering taste of sacred melon. You close your eyes, and then you hear it. A soft scraping sound. You sit up slightly, glancing toward the garden gate. There, someone is placing something in the ground. A small bundle, wrapped in cloth. They glance around, then press it into the soil and cover it carefully. You squint. It's the scribe from earlier, the one muttering to himself during dinner. You lie back down, heartbeat slow, but awake now. You don't say anything. Just listen as the garden accepts yet another secret into its roots. Tomorrow, someone will dig that spot for yams or onions. They'll find the cloth, or not. They'll ask questions, or not. The garden won't say a word. It never does. But it remembers. Your dreams are strange. In one, you're sitting in the lotus pond, legs folded like a priest, while fish swim up and whisper tax advice into your ears. In another, the sacred gourd leads a council of elders and declares war on a nearby orchard. You wake just as it slaps a fig with its tiny vine hand. You blink into the early morning haze. The garden is silver with dew, and the low mist clings to the bricks like sleepy breath. The air is cool, cool enough to make you shiver, warm enough to lull you right back into a half doze. But there's movement, a quiet rustling, then a thunk. You lift your head and spot two figures near the tool shed. One is tall and broad-shouldered, definitely Dagon the Miller, who's not supposed to be up this early unless something caught fire. The other is smaller, a kid, maybe 14, with wild hair and sandals 2 sizes too big. They're hauling something heavy, wrapped in cloth again. Not a bundle this time, more like a crate. You're not Snoopy by nature, but you are awake and curious and probably too involved already. You roll quietly to your feet and pad toward the far end of the garden, where the tall reeds hide your approach. You crouch behind them, brushing a beetle off your knee. The pair lower the crate next to a shallow pit, already dug. Dagon mutters something, then pulls out a tiny clay idol. It's not one you recognize. Big eyes, long nose, shaped like a peanut with delusions of grandeur. The kid nods solemnly. He said, "It's the spirit of the lost door." You blink. The what now? Dagon rubs the idol with oil, muttering a chant in thick Sumerian. The kid follows along in broken syllables. They drop the idol in the crate, along with a dried fish and a handful of barley, then cover it with dirt. You almost sneeze, but you don't. You stay still as a rock wall while they pat the earth and walk away, talking about breakfast and whether the oil was old enough to count as sacred. Once they're gone, you step out and approach the spot. You don't dig, of course. You just look. A tiny reed has already sprouted beside the mound. "Spirit of the lost door," you whisper. "Hope you like it here." You head back toward your mat, but you never make it, because Kala finds you first, holding a lump of beeswax and a sheepish grin. "Time to earn your keep," she says, shoving the wax into your hands. "We're making a temple model." You stare. "Out of wax?" "Yep. Don't worry. It's not supposed to look good. It's supposed to melt." You follow her to the shaded corner of the garden, where 3 other unlucky souls are already shaping tiny towers and stairs out of sticky wax. There's even a mini ziggurat, slightly leaning to one side like it had a rough night out. The idea, apparently, is this: build a replica of the temple, melt it as an offering, and hope the gods appreciate the symbolism. You start molding your wax with clumsy fingers. It sticks under your nails. It smells faintly like honey and wool. Kala's already ahead of you, carving teeny steps into her ziggurat's sides. "This is for Gibble," she explains, "the fire god. They say if you melt a wax temple for him, he keeps your house from catching fire." Historians still argue whether Gibble was a true fire deity or just a personification of oops moments. She snorts. Well, either way, it beats rebuilding. Someone brings over a basin filled with hot coals. You set your little wax mess on a clay tile and lower it gently over the heat. It begins to sag immediately. The tower topples. The stairs collapse. Kala watches hers melt like a proud mother watching her toddler fall gracefully into a mud puddle. You sit beside the fading models, watching the wax pool and steam. The air smells sweeter now, tinged with smoke and old prayers. One of the other wax melters, a lanky boy with serious eyebrows, leans over. "My uncle said this tradition started when someone built a temple from cheese and accidentally summoned a god of dairy." You glance at him. That feels made up. He shrugs. Everything does, until it doesn't. The melting continues. You fall into the rhythm of it, carving, melting, wiping your hands, laughing when Kala's new temple caves in like a badly baked cake. Around you, the garden is awake again. Birds peck the ground for insects. Bees buzz around the tamarisk. Somewhere, a goat farts loudly enough to cause momentary spiritual concern. The temple dog strolls by and sniffs the wax puddles. You catch its eye. It nods once. You're not sure if that actually happened or if you're just very, very tired. Eventually, the last of the wax melts. You collect the remains into a clay bowl and hand it to the priest's assistant, who thanks you with the solemnity of someone accepting a fragment of cosmic balance. Think it worked? You ask. Kala stretches her arms. Only one way to find out. You both glance at the temple walls. Still standing. So far, so good. Later that morning, as the sun rises high enough to bleach the bricks a pale yellow and make everyone regret wearing dark wool, you find yourself standing ankle-deep in a trench, holding a shovel that was probably last sharpened during Hammurabi's adolescence. It's yam relocation day. Don't ask why. No one really knows. The head gardener woke up and announced that the yams needed spiritual rebalance. Or maybe they just grew too close to the garden's northeast corner and the priest got twitchy about energy flow. Either way, it's digging time. Kala wipes her forehead with the edge of her sleeve, glancing at you over her own shovel. How many yams have we moved? You grunt. About 8. She sighs. Feels like 80. A nearby boy pipes up, cheerful as a cockerel. Only 4 more to go. You and Kala exchange the sort of look that should turn statues to dust. You dig. You sweat. You unearth roots so gnarled they look like they've been stress knitting underground for generations. Occasionally, you pause to chase away a curious goose who has taken a personal interest in your every movement. You name him Lugal, short for Lugal Kalam, the king of the realm. Because he acts like he owns the place, he honks at you, then struts away to menace a basket of cucumbers. You know, Kala mutters, hoisting a particularly stubborn yam. This would be easier if we had a plow. You glance around. We're in a garden. There's no room for oxen. Maybe we could train the goose. Historians still argue whether geese were used for pest control or just tolerated as feathered chaos agents. She snorts and tosses the yam into a reed basket. When the last yam is placed reverently in its new hole, surrounded by a circle of pebbles and exactly 3 incense pellets, because someone decided that mattered, you collapse under the shade of a fig tree. And that's when the scribe returns. Not the kid. The serious one. The one who muttered to himself during dinner and buried something in the garden under the veil of darkness. He's carrying a tablet this time, pressed tight to his chest, like it might float away if he loosens his grip. His eyes scan the garden nervously. You watch him for a moment, then call out, "Lose something." He startles, then shuffles over. Number. Well, yes, sort of. I found something. Kala squints at him. You found a... He crouches beside you and flips the tablet over. On it is a diagram. Scratchy, rushed, but unmistakable. It's a map of the garden. You stare at it. Is that us? He nods. And that, he points at a rectangular mark near the duck pond, is something buried. Very old, possibly royal, possibly cursed. Kala raises an eyebrow. And you know this how? I had a dream. You both groan at the same time. No, really, he insists. A vision. A figure in a bronze robe stood beside the tamarisk tree and said, "Seek the root of memory." Then he handed me a carrot and disappeared. You rub your temples. How did we get from that to royal tomb under the duck pond? He looks very serious. The carrot was symbolic. Of course it was. Still, he seems genuinely excited, and a tiny part of you, just one sliver of sun-warmed, wax-smudged soul, feels curious too. You rise to your feet. Fine. Show us. You and Kala follow him to the far corner of the garden, where the ducks waddle around as if they've all just gotten out of a particularly messy board meeting. He points to a raised mound of earth just behind the reeds. It's here. Let me guess, Kala says. You want us to dig? He nods. Just enough to find a marker, maybe an old brick, or a seal. With a sigh, you retrieve the same shovel you just swore never to touch again. You sink it into the soil. It's looser here, softer, as though it's been stirred up before. That alone is enough to make your skin prickle. 5 minutes in, the shovel hits something hard. You both freeze. You clear the dirt carefully. A rectangular slab reveals itself, carved with strange markings, not cuneiform, not anything you recognize. Almost spirals? Like someone doodled with a dull reed stylus and forgot to stop. The scribe gasps. It's real. It's really here. Kala crouches. Could be a drain cover. Or a lid. You glance at each other. Then a shadow falls across you all. It's the head gardener. He looks at the slab, then at the scribe, then at you. You found the songstone, he says quietly. Kala blinks. The what? It was buried generations ago, the gardener explains, kneeling beside the stone. Said to be a gift from a king to his lover, a musician. You touched it, and it would sing. The scribe is practically vibrating. Can we, The gardener raises a hand. Number. Not yet. It's not time. And then, as if on cue, a single note echoes from the reeds. A flute? Number too smooth, too pure. It fades into the air like incense. You turn to each other slowly. Did that come from... The gardener smiles, enigmatic and tired. The garden remembers. You help cover the stone again, this time gently, respectfully. The scribe murmurs a prayer in between hiccups of awe. And later, while sitting beside the duck pond, watching Lugal the goose bully a passing cricket, you murmur to Kala, you think it really sang? She doesn't answer. Just leans back against the tree and closes her eyes. The ducks glide in silence, and from somewhere beneath your feet, the earth hums. So faint you might be imagining it, but you don't move. You just listen. The garden is waking slowly now, as if reluctant to start the day, but obliged by the sun's relentless rise. The air smells of freshly baked barley bread, roasting figs, and the faintest hint of something metallic, probably from the copper tools left drying by the pottery kiln. You wander toward the garden's eastern edge, where the ancient date palms crowd like old storytellers, leaning in close to share secrets. Between their trunks, you spot a small group gathered near the well, a cluster of women chatting quietly while rinsing freshly picked herbs. You approach, curious. One of them, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and a smile that could melt clay, gestures you over. Come, help us, she says softly. It's time for the morning offering. You nod and join them, watching as they carefully gather handfuls of the herbs, mint, hyssop, coriander, and place them into a shallow clay bowl filled with water from the well. The bowl is decorated with tiny cuneiform inscriptions, blessings for the day's work. She explains, this water is sacred. Taken at dawn, it holds the breath of the river gods. We offer herbs to purify the garden and protect it from spirits that might wander while we sleep. You dip your fingers into the cool water, the scent sharp and fresh. The women begin chanting softly, a lilting song in Sumerian that you only half understand, but the melody wraps around you like a gentle breeze. As you listen, You notice a young girl in the group holding a strange object, a small clay whistle shaped like a bird. She blows into it, and a clear, sweet note rings out, blending perfectly with the chants. You ask the older woman about it. That's a sapu, she says, a ritual whistle, used to call the protective spirits, or sometimes to scare off unwanted guests. You grin. Historians still argue whether the sapu was more musical instrument or ancient air horn. The group laughs softly, and you feel a sudden warmth, a sense of belonging to something much bigger than yourself. After the chants, the women scatter the herb-infused water over the soil, the droplets sparkling in the morning light. The scent rises, mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly turned earth. You help water a few of the plants, feeling the coolness seep into your skin, grounding you. Nearby, the gardener from last night approaches, carrying a basket of ripe figs. Try one, he offers. You take a bite. The sweetness explodes, sticky and rich, a perfect counterpoint to the morning's freshness. As you savor the fruit, he tells you about the significance of figs in Mesopotamian culture, a symbol of fertility and prosperity. He mentions that some temples kept sacred fig trees, believed to be planted by the gods themselves. You listen, fascinated, but then your attention shifts as the sound of distant drums begins to pulse through the air. A slow, steady beat that vibrates through the soil and into your chest. The women finish their ritual and begin to gather their things, whispering about an upcoming festival. You learn it's the Akitu, the New Year's festival, celebrating renewal and the victory of the god Marduk over chaos. The gardener looks at you, eyes gleaming. There will be music, dances, and feasts. The whole city will be alive. You feel a thrill of excitement mixed with exhaustion. The garden, after all its secrets and rituals, is not just a place of quiet reflection, but a living, breathing heart of the community. You linger a moment longer, watching the sunlight play through the palm fronds, feeling the pulse of life all around. And as you walk back toward your resting place, you realize that the garden is more than earth and plants. It's a story, written in roots and stones, whispers and songs, and you're part of it. The day stretches on like a lazy river, winding through moments both ordinary and strange, pulling you deeper into the garden's embrace. You find yourself near the orchard, where pomegranate trees cluster, their branches heavy with fruit that gleams like tiny suns. The air here smells sweeter, tart, almost intoxicating. Kala is crouched beside one tree, carefully pruning its limbs with a bronze blade that glints in the afternoon sun. She pauses, then grins at you. Want to help? You nod, though your arms protest the thought of more work. As you snip and gather fallen leaves, she shares a story about pomegranates in Mesopotamian lore. They were symbols of life and death, fertility and rebirth. Dualities the people lived with every day. She mentions that some myths link the pomegranate to the underworld goddess Ereshkigal, who was believed to trap souls within its seeds. You chew on that while plucking a ripe fruit from the tree. The skin is tough, but inside, the jewel-like seeds burst with juice so tart it makes your eyes water. Fun fact, Kala says, wiping her brow. Historians still argue whether the pomegranate was native to Mesopotamia or imported through trade. You laugh. Trade? They probably bargained with some long-bearded traveler from the mountains. Nearby, a small crowd gathers around the garden's edge, where a man sets up a clay oven. The smell of baking bread soon drifts toward you, mingling with the fruit's sweetness. Suddenly, A sharp cry cuts through the air. You turn to see a boy chasing a goat, a mischievous creature who has just stolen a basket of figs. The chase is chaotic, with yells and laughter blending into the garden's soundtrack. The goat slips under a fence, disappearing into the reeds, while the boy flops onto the ground, breathless and defeated. Kala shakes her head. That goat's got more brains than most of us. You sit back against the tree, watching the sun shift shadows across the earth. The garden feels alive in a way that's hard to explain, like the soil itself hums with stories. You notice the delicate patterns carved into the bricks surrounding the orchard, zigzag lines and spirals that seem to dance in the fading light. You touch one and wonder who first shaped these designs. Were they just decoration? Or did they hold secret meanings, like messages between gods and mortals? Historians still argue whether those carvings were purely decorative or coded prayers, you mutter. Kala nods. Maybe both. Or neither. Sometimes a pattern is just a pattern. As evening approaches, the garden shifts again. The air cools, the shadows deepen, and the cicadas begin their ceaseless chorus. You think about the day. The yams moved, the wax temples melted, the songstone buried, and now this orchard full of sunlit fruit and laughter. The garden has become a world within a world, a place where time flows differently, marked by rituals, stories, and the simple rhythm of life. You feel your eyelids grow heavy, your body aching, but your mind calm. You realize that this is why you came here, not just to observe, but to belong, to be part of a living history, whispered by palms and sung by birds. And as night falls, you lay back on the soft earth, the scent of pomegranates mingling with the cool breeze. The stars begin to twinkle overhead, ancient eyes watching over the garden's secrets. And you drift off, carried by the garden's timeless lullaby. You wake to a sky brushed with pink and gold, the first light gently spilling across the garden like spilled honey. The earth beneath you feels cool and comforting. The smell of damp soil mixing with faint traces of jasmine and wild mint. Stretching, you notice that the garden is unusually quiet. No chirping birds, no buzzing bees, just a soft, almost reverent stillness. A kind of hush that makes you tiptoe through the dew-soaked grass, as if the plants themselves are holding their breath. You head toward the stone altar in the garden's heart. Its carved edges catch the dawn light, casting long shadows across the cracked surface. Nearby, a small pile of offerings awaits: pomegranates, dates, sprigs of thyme. Kala is already there, arranging the gifts with the precision of a priestess. "Morning," she whispers, eyes shining. "You're just in time." You crouch beside her, feeling the rough stone beneath your palms. "This is the day of the Enuma Elish recitation," she explains. "The creation story. It's a sacred tradition here, telling how the gods shaped the world from chaos." You listen as she begins to recite the ancient verses, her voice low and rhythmic, carrying the weight of millennia. The story unfolds of Tiamat, the saltwater goddess, battling Marduk, the storm god, who splits her in two to create heaven and earth. You shiver at the imagery. Cosmic battles, rivers of blood turning to fertile soil, stars born from divine eyes. Historians still argue whether the Enuma Elish was meant as religious doctrine or royal propaganda, Kala says softly. Either way, it shaped how people understood their place in the universe. As she speaks, you notice something strange, a faint shimmer along the altar's edges, like the stone itself is breathing. You reach out hesitantly, fingers grazing the surface. A sudden warmth spreads through your palm, and for a moment, the garden seems to pulse with life. You blink, and it's gone. Shaking your head, you tell yourself it was just the morning light playing tricks. Nearby, the scribe from before approaches, carrying a bundle of papyrus scrolls. I thought you might want to see these, he says, spreading them out carefully. They're copies of the Enuma Elish, each tablet inscribed with the delicate, wedge-shaped cuneiform characters. You lean in, tracing the lines with your eyes. This writing system, you say, was revolutionary, one of the earliest forms of recorded language. Kala nods. And it wasn't just for kings and priests. Farmers used it too, to keep track of crops and trade. The scribe smiles. Though some of the glyphs are still a mystery, scholars debate whether certain signs represent sounds or whole words. You laugh softly, like ancient emoji, but harder to decipher. Suddenly, a breeze stirs the scrolls, sending them fluttering like giant paper birds. You scramble to catch them, laughing with Kala and the scribe as the garden fills again with life. The sun climbs higher, warming the stones and stirring the flowers. You feel the ancient world breathing all around you, its stories, its secrets, its endless, unfolding mysteries. And somewhere deep inside, you realize you're part of that story now. The garden whispers its welcome. By midday, the garden has taken on a different rhythm, the steady hum of labor blending with bursts of laughter and the occasional squawk of an indignant chicken. The heat presses down, softening shadows and making the pottery kiln's orange glow seem like a distant sun. You find yourself drawn to the edge of the vegetable patch, where rows of lentils, onions, and garlic grow in neat lines. Nearby, a man with sun-darkened skin and strong hands is carefully tending to a small fire pit, his focus absolute. He looks up as you approach, wiping sweat from his brow with a linen cloth. "You here to learn the art of pottery firing?" he asks with a grin. You nod eagerly. He motions to the kiln, a sturdy clay structure built into the earth. This is where the garden's pottery comes to life. Without good pots, no one can store water or grains properly. As he feeds dry reeds into the flames, he tells you about the long tradition of pottery in Mesopotamia, how it dates back thousands of years and evolved alongside the civilization itself. The colors and shapes change with each generation, he says. Sometimes we add symbols, like the fish or the sun, to bring good fortune. You ask about the mysterious little seals impressed on some pots, those tiny detailed images that look almost like stamps. He chuckles. Ah, the cylinder seals. Historians still argue whether they were just signatures or had magical powers to protect the contents. You watch as the fire grows, flames licking the kiln's mouth, the heat rising in waves that shimmer in the air. Suddenly the man pauses, glancing at the sky. Look there. The clouds gather. It's a sign. You follow his gaze to a gathering mass of dark shapes drifting slowly over the garden. He explains, rain is a blessing here, rare and precious. It can make or break a season. You nod, remembering how the ancient Sumerians depended on the unpredictable Tigris and Euphrates rivers, their lives governed by the mercy of the waters. As the first drops fall, the garden seems to sigh in relief. The scent of wet earth rises, mingling with smoke and baked clay. You feel a sudden kinship with the potter, both shaping and shaped by this land, this fragile oasis. And as the rain begins to fall in earnest, you realize that even in a place so old, life continues in cycles of fire and water, growth and harvest, song and silence. The garden breathes with you, sharing its ancient heartbeat in every drop. The rain has settled into a gentle rhythm, tapping softly on the leaves and pooling in tiny puddles between the garden stones. The air smells of damp earth and crushed herbs, fresh and alive. You shelter beneath a broad fig tree, watching droplets gather on its thick leaves, shimmering like jewels before slipping away to nourish the roots. Nearby, the garden workers gather under makeshift shelters, sharing quiet conversation and passing around woven baskets filled with dates and bread. The mood is calm, even reverent. Rain here is a gift, a rare and precious visitor. You think about the ancient irrigation canals that crisscross this land, some of the earliest engineering feats in human history designed to tame the unpredictable rivers and bring life to these dry fields. You watch as a small boy splashes in a puddle, his laughter ringing out pure and joyous. It reminds you how much of ancient life was rooted in simple pleasures, despite all the hardships. Then your attention drifts to a cluster of small clay figurines near the altar, tiny idols carved with exaggerated eyes and serene expressions. Someone tells you these are protective spirits, household gods meant to guard the family and garden. You wonder at the ancient belief systems, how gods and spirits were woven into everyday life, as natural and essential as breathing. Historians still argue whether some of these figurines were for worship or just toys. You murmur to yourself, smiling at the thought. As the rain tapers off, a soft golden light filters through the clouds, casting the garden in a dreamy glow. You take a deep breath, savoring the quiet aftermath, feeling a profound connection to this place and its timeless rhythms. Here, in the heart of Ur's garden, you've walked through rituals, tasted ancient fruits, heard stories etched in stone and song. And now, as the day closes, the garden's whispered lullaby wraps around you gently, like a promise that life, no matter how ancient or fleeting, always finds a way to bloom. End of script. Sweet dreams.